He has no talent. Those were the words thrown at the British Bulldog throughout his career. But on the 3rd of September 1992, in front of 80,355 screaming fans at Wembley Stadium, Davey Boy Smith proved everyone wrong. That night became the proudest moment in British wrestling history. The roar of the crowd shook the stadium. The weight of expectation sat heavy on his shoulders. Yet he delivered a performance that would define not just his career, but an entire generation of British wrestling fans. However, the same career that made him a hero also built a long list of real enemies. This is the story of 10 wrestlers the British Bulldog truly hated. Before we dive in, if you want more stories like this, hit the hype feature and give hype to this video, because this one gets messy fast. In wrestling, there's a difference between storyline heat and real heat. Storyline heat is what you see on television. It's manufactured drama designed to sell tickets. Real heat means genuine anger, personal resentment that follows you from the locker room to the ring and back again. It festers in silence during long road trips. It explodes in confrontations behind closed doors. The British Bulldog lived in a world built on three things: ribbing that went too far, political games that destroyed careers, and dangerous negligence that wrecked bodies. Bulldog got caught in all three, and sometimes he helped create them. Born in Goulburn, Lancashire in 1962, Davey Boy Smith started wrestling at 15 years old. He trained in the legendary Hart Dungeon in Calgary, where Stu Hart broke down bodies and rebuilt them as wrestlers. The training was brutal. The culture was unforgiving. Young Davey learned quickly that respect came through toughness. Loyalty meant everything, and weakness would be exploited without mercy. Number 10, Bad News Brown. Alan Coge was a legitimate judo champion who wrestled under the name Bad News Brown. He had competed in the Olympics, he had won medals, he had nothing to prove to anyone, and he had no time for the ribbing culture or the social cliques of the 1980s locker room. While other wrestlers played pranks and enforced hierarchies through humiliation, Bad News simply wanted to do his job and go home. Bulldog was part of the Hart family inner circle. That meant something in the wrestling world. It came with privileges, protection, and expectations. Bad News was a fierce loner who rejected the entire system. That created friction from the start. Bulldog resented Bad News for refusing to follow the unwritten rules. The locker room had codes that stretched back decades, traditions passed down from veteran to rookie, ways of doing things that everyone understood without needing explanation. You paid your dues. You showed respect to the established stars. You participated in the camaraderie, even when it got rough. Bad News ignored all of it. He didn't see why he should bow to traditions that served no purpose beyond maintaining power structures. He was already a proven athlete before he ever stepped into a wrestling ring. The locker room politics felt juvenile to him. The ribbing felt cruel. He kept to himself and expected the same courtesy in return. During a tour of Japan, the tension between Bulldog and Bad News reached a breaking point. Japan tours were pressure cookers. Wrestlers spent weeks together in close quarters, working show after show, traveling from city to city with little rest. Personalities clashed, tempers flared. The two got into heated arguments about locker room conduct and match pacing. Bad News felt Bulldog's circle was trying to dictate how he should work. Bulldog felt Bad News was refusing to be a team player. During one particularly intense disagreement, Bad News reportedly threatened Bulldog directly. Bulldog saw Bad News as a bully who used his legitimate fighting background to intimidate other wrestlers. The irony was thick. Bulldog himself was part of a group known for bullying, but he viewed their ribbing as tradition, as paying dues, as the way things had always been done. Bad News using his real fighting skills felt like cheating the system. Bad News just wanted to work his matches without the childish pranks and power games. He saw the locker room culture as toxic masculinity gone mad. The cultural clash never resolved. They kept their distance and their resentment. When their paths crossed, the tension was palpable. Neither man forgot, neither man forgave. Number 9, the Warlord. Throughout the early 1990s, Bulldog feuded with Terry Sapinski, known as the Warlord. On television, it looked like a clash of powerhouses. Two massive men with incredible physiques colliding in the ring. The WWF presented it as an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. Behind the scenes, Bulldog had serious problems with the man. Bulldog prided himself on his technical training in Calgary. The Hart Dungeon had given him a foundation in legitimate wrestling technique. He knew how to apply holds properly. He understood leverage and positioning. He knew how to make moves look devastating while keeping his opponent safe. He was trained properly in the art of professional wrestling. He viewed the Warlord as a body guy who lacked fundamental skills. Sapinski had an impressive physique built through hours in the gym, but Bulldog thought he was reckless with that strength. Power without control was dangerous. Size without technique led to injuries. Several minor injuries happened during their matches. A stiff clothesline here, an awkward landing there. Nothing career-ending, but enough to make Bulldog wary. He believed they were avoidable with proper training and awareness. Each incident reinforced his opinion that the Warlord didn't belong in the ring with trained workers. Worse, Bulldog felt trapped. He was stuck in a repetitive mid-card feud while he should have been moving up the card. His win at Wembley had made him a star. He had proven he could carry a main event match. He wanted to challenge for the World Championship. He wanted to be in programs with the top names. Instead, he was kept in place, working the same match over and over with someone he didn't trust. The same clothesline spots, the same power move exchanges, the same finish week after week. His momentum stalled, his star power dimmed. The frustration built with each passing month. Bulldog saw younger, less experienced wrestlers getting opportunities while he spun his wheels. He blamed the Warlord for being a dead weight on his career. He blamed the bookers for not seeing his potential. He blamed the political structure that kept him from breaking through. The resentment lasted long after the feud ended. Years later, when discussing his WWF career, Bulldog would cite this period as one of the most frustrating of his professional life. He felt underutilized. He felt disrespected. He felt like his talent was being wasted on programs that went nowhere. Number 8, The Islanders. In the late 1980s, WWF televised a storyline where the Islanders dog-napped Matilda, the British Bulldog's mascot. The angle was designed to generate heat for the feud. On paper, it made perfect sense. The beloved dog gets stolen. The heroes chase after the villains. The fans rally behind the Bulldogs to get their mascot back. The theft was scripted. Everyone involved knew it was part of the show, but the heat that followed was very real. Bulldog was genuinely attached to Matilda. The dog had become a symbol of the team. Fans loved seeing Matilda at ringside. Children wanted to pet the dog after shows. Matilda was family to Bulldog, not just a prop. When Haku and Tama handled the dog roughly during filming, Bulldog became furious. He watched them grab Matilda without care. He saw the dog's distress. He felt the Islanders were taking liberties with the animal just to get a reaction from him. They were blurring the line between working an angle and genuine mistreatment. Backstage confrontations followed immediately. Bulldog cornered the Islanders and made his feelings clear. His dog was not to be handled that way. If they couldn't work the angle with respect for the animal, they shouldn't be working the angle at all. Haku was known as one of the most legitimately feared men in wrestling. Stories about his toughness were legendary. Wrestlers who had been in real fights described Haku as the last person they would ever want to face. His reputation for being able to legitimately hurt people was well established, but Bulldog's protective nature over Matilda pushed him past caution. He didn't care about Haku's reputation in that moment. He cared about his dog. The confrontation could have escalated into violence. Cooler heads eventually prevailed, but the damage to their relationship was permanent. The tension spilled into their matches. They became unnecessarily stiff and aggressive. Punches landed harder than they needed to. Chops left deeper welts. Slams looked brutal because they were brutal. The Islanders and the Bulldogs took liberties with each other in the ring as payback for the backstage conflict. Bulldog never forgave them for crossing the line between professional work and personal disrespect. To him, using Matilda roughly wasn't just bad judgment. It was a violation of basic decency. Animals couldn't consent to being part of the business. They deserved protection and care. The Islanders had failed that basic test of character. Number 7, Bret Hart. This one cuts deep because they were family. Bret Hart was Bulldog's brother-in-law through Bret's sister Diana. They teamed together multiple times. They worked together in some of the most memorable matches of the era. Family dinners meant seeing each other outside the ring. Their children played together. On the surface, they had every reason to maintain a strong relationship. But underneath the family ties, Bulldog carried quiet resentment that grew over years. After their legendary match at SummerSlam 1992, Bret began telling a story that would follow both men for the rest of their lives. He said Bulldog was fucked on drugs that night. He said he had to carry Bulldog through the entire match. Bret framed himself as the master psychologist who saved the performance through his superior ring awareness and ability to call the match on the fly. In Bret's version of events, Bulldog was barely functional. Bret had to guide him through every spot. Bret had to make all the decisions. Bret had to ensure the match stayed on track despite his partner's impaired state. The story made Bret look heroic and professional while making Bulldog look unreliable and unprofessional. Bulldog's drug issues were real. Everyone in the industry knew it. Substance abuse was rampant in wrestling during that era. The schedule demanded it. The pain required it. The pressure encouraged it. Bulldog was far from the only wrestler struggling with addiction. But Bulldog felt Bret weaponized the narrative for personal gain. Instead of keeping the family matter private, Bret discussed it in interviews. He discussed it in documentaries. He discussed it in his autobiography. Each retelling reinforced the image of Bret as the consummate professional and Bulldog as the talented talented but troubled performer who couldn't be trusted. Bret used the story to boost his own reputation while diminishing Bulldog's contribution to what many consider one of the greatest matches in wrestling history. The match was a masterpiece of storytelling and technical execution. The crowd was electric from start to finish. The emotion was genuine. The stakes felt real. Bulldog believed he earned his share of the credit. He hit his marks. He performed the moves. He connected with the crowd. Yes, he was dealing with personal issues, but he delivered when it mattered. The match succeeded because both men were at the top of their game that night. Instead, he became a footnote in Bret's story, the troubled performer who needed to be carried, the liability who could have ruined everything, the family member who couldn't keep his life together. The family dynamics made it worse. The Hart family was wrestling royalty in Calgary. Being part of that family came with expectations and judgment. Bulldog felt treated as a second-tier Hart, despite marrying into the family and achieving significant success in his own right. He was never quite good enough in the eyes of the family patriarch. He was always in someone's shadow. When he succeeded, it was because of Hart training. When he failed, it was his own fault. The resentment stayed buried for the sake of family harmony, but it never went away. Even years after the match, after Bret had left WWF and their careers had taken different paths, the story persisted. New fans discovered the match and heard Bret's version of events. Wrestling historians repeated the narrative. Bulldog's own accomplishments became overshadowed by Bret's need to control the story. Number 6, Hulk Hogan. In 1993, Bulldog joined WCW as a top-tier performer. The company was looking to build new stars and challenge WWF's dominance. Bulldog was brought in with significant fanfare. He was positioned as a major signing who could help elevate the company's credibility. He was brought in to challenge Big Van Vader, one of the most dominant monsters in wrestling. The feud had potential. Vader was a believable threat. Bulldog was a believable challenger. The matches would be physical and intense. His momentum looked strong coming out of the gate. Then Hulk Hogan arrived, and everything changed overnight. Hogan came to WCW with massive fanfare and an even more massive contract. He brought name recognition, he brought mainstream attention, he brought the promise of higher ratings and bigger paydays. But he also brought creative control clauses that gave him unprecedented power over booking decisions. Bulldog watched his push evaporate almost immediately. Storylines that had been planned for him were suddenly changed. Matches that had been scheduled were canceled or moved down the card. The focus shifted entirely to Hogan in building the company around his presence. Hogan had creative control clauses in his contract that allowed him to protect his character and his position at the top of the card. Bulldog believed Hogan used those clauses to keep other wrestlers from overshadowing the Hulkamania brand. Any wrestler who might pose a threat to Hogan's dominance found themselves stalled or buried. Storylines shifted to accommodate Hogan's preferences. Bulldog got stalled in the mid-card while Hogan worked with established names and hand-picked opponents. The opportunity to break through to the main event level slipped away. In 1998, Bulldog returned to WCW with Jim Neidhart after leaving WWF following the Montreal Screwjob. They were part of the exodus of Hart family wrestlers who felt betrayed by Vince McMahon. They expected WCW to value their loyalty and their talent. Instead, they were treated as political leverage, not valuable performers. They were post-Screwjob refugees from the Hart family, useful for making WWF look bad, but not important enough to receive significant television time or meaningful storylines. Eric Bischoff and Hogan kept them in a meaningless tag team that served no real purpose. They rarely appeared on television. When they did appear, it was in throwaway matches that meant nothing to the overall direction of the company. They were paid well, but they were creatively ignored. The frustration burned deep because Bulldog outdrew Hogan in international markets, especially the United Kingdom. Bulldog was a genuine star in his home country. He could sell out arenas, he could move merchandise, he had name recognition that surpassed even Hogan's in certain markets. Yet Hogan controlled the booking through his relationship with Bischoff and his contract stipulations. Bulldog saw himself as the bigger star overseas, but it didn't matter. Politics trumped drawing power. Hogan's American popularity and mainstream recognition gave him leverage that Bulldog could never match. Bulldog viewed Hogan as a progress stopper who prioritized his own longevity over everyone else's careers. Instead of helping build new stars or putting over younger talent, Hogan protected his spot at all costs. The glass ceiling was real and immovable. Bulldog never broke through it in WCW. His time in the company was largely wasted. His talent was underutilized. His frustration grew with each passing month until it became clear that nothing would change as long as Hogan held his creative control. Number 5, Jake Roberts. The feud with Jake. The Snake Roberts represents one of the darkest chapters in wrestling's ribbing culture. It started innocently enough, at least by the standards of 1980s locker room behavior, but it escalated into genuine animosity that revealed the cruelty underlying much of the fun that wrestlers claimed to be having. It started when the British Bulldogs began flicking lit cigarettes at Damien, Jake's snake, while it was in its bag. The goal was simple and cruel: agitate the snake so it would be angry and aggressive when Jake opened the bag. If everything went according to plan, the snake would bite Jake when he reached in to retrieve it for his entrance. This was considered a rib, a prank, locker room fun. The Bulldogs thought it was hilarious. They would watch Jake prepare for his entrance, knowing that Damien was agitated and dangerous, and wait for something to go wrong. Jake Roberts was not the type to let that slide. His reputation for intensity wasn't just a character trait. Jake had a dark streak that made him genuinely frightening to cross. He understood psychology better than most wrestlers. He knew how to hurt people where it mattered most. He targeted Matilda in Retaliation. Knowing that Bulldog genuinely cared about the dog, Jake bought 7 chili hot dogs and fed them all to Matilda. Then he positioned himself outside the Bulldog's hotel room and repeatedly banged on the door to keep the animal agitated. The biological result was inevitable. The resulting mess left the Bulldog's room covered in feces. The smell was overwhelming. The cleanup was extensive. The hotel charged them for the damage. Bulldog was genuinely distressed. He cared about Matilda's well-being. Seeing the dog suffer from digestive distress caused by Jake's actions crossed a line that even the rough locker room culture couldn't justify. He viewed Jake's response as going too far. Ribbing other wrestlers was one thing. That was part of the culture. Everyone participated. Everyone took their lumps. But targeting a living creature was something else entirely. Animals couldn't understand the context. They couldn't consent to being part of locker room politics. Using Matilda as a weapon to get revenge made Jake someone who couldn't be trusted with basic decency. While they worked together professionally in the 1990s, when both men were dealing with personal issues and diminished positions in the industry, Bulldog never trusted Jake again. Their interactions remained cold and professional. He saw an evil streak in Jake that went beyond the requirements of their profession. Jake wasn't just playing a character when he did dark things. There was something genuine behind it. The relationship stayed cold until Bulldog's death. The rib war had revealed something about both men that couldn't be forgotten. Number 4, Jacques Rougeau. The heat with Jacques Rougeau grew directly out of the toxic locker room environment the British Bulldogs created and maintained throughout the mid-1980s. The Bulldogs were known as enforcers. They participated enthusiastically in the ribbing culture. They targeted wrestlers they viewed as weak or deserving of humiliation. The Rougeau brothers became particular targets. The Bulldogs engaged in escalating ribs against them that went far beyond harmless pranks. The harassment was constant and cruel. It created a hostile working environment that made the Rougeau dread going to work. Everything culminated in a physical assault by Dynamite Kid on Jacques during a card game in Miami. The details vary depending on who tells the story, but the result was clear. Dynamite attacked Jacques in a non-wrestling setting over something that had nothing to do with their professional work. Bulldog was viewed as a silent accomplice in these bullying tactics. Even if he didn't throw the punches, he was Dynamite's partner. He benefited from the fear the Bulldogs generated. He participated in enough of the ribs to be complicit in the culture they created. Jacques decided to retaliate in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He had reached his breaking point. The harassment had gone on too long. Someone needed to send a message that the Bulldogs weren't untouchable. Jacques wrapped a roll of quarters in his fist to maximize the impact of his punch. The quarters turned his fist into a weapon that could do serious damage. Then he waited for the right moment and sucker punched Dynamite Kid in the locker room, knocking out several teeth. The attack was brutal and effective. Dynamite was genuinely hurt. The dental damage was expensive to repair. More importantly, the aura of invincibility surrounding the Bulldogs was shattered in front of the entire locker room. Dynamite was the direct target, but Bulldog felt intense heat toward Jacques over the unprofessional nature of the attack. The irony was remarkable. Bulldog and Dynamite had spent years tormenting other wrestlers through ribs and intimidation, but when someone fought back using their own methods, suddenly it was unprofessional. He viewed it as a violation of the wrestler's code, which typically favored in-ring resolution over hallway ambushes. Disputes were supposed to be settled between the ropes, where both men had a chance to defend themselves. Sucker punches in the locker room were cowardly. Of course, the Bulldogs had violated that same code repeatedly through their ribs and harassment, but Bulldog didn't see it that way. In his mind, ribbing was tradition. What Jacques did was assault. The incident forced the Bulldogs into a defensive posture in the locker room. Other wrestlers who had been terrorized by the Bulldogs saw that retaliation was possible. The fear that had protected the Bulldogs diminished. Their status as the industry's premier enforcers eroded. Even after Dynamite's departure from WWF, WWF, Bulldog remained wary of the Rougeaus. He associated them with the moment the Bulldog's dominance ended. The memory of Dynamite's bloody mouth and missing teeth stayed with him. Years later, the resentment remained. Bulldog never forgave Jacques for the attack, even though objective observers could see it as justified retaliation for years of abuse. Bulldog helped build the problem through his association with Dynamite's bullying. Then he acted shocked when it exploded in violence. Number 3, Ultimate Warrior. The relationship between Bulldog and Jim Hellwig, the Ultimate Warrior, was defined by 2 moments of betrayal that left lasting damage. Both incidents revealed the selfishness and negligence that characterized Warrior's approach to the business. The first happened in 1992 during WWF's federal steroid investigation. The government was examining the wrestling industry's drug culture. Vince McMahon was cleaning up the company's image to avoid legal consequences. Several high-profile wrestlers were let go as part of this house cleaning. Both Bulldog and Warrior were abruptly fired. The terminations came without warning. One day they were employed, the next day they were gone. According to Bulldog's final interview in 2002, shortly before his death, the circumstances of his firing involved direct betrayal by Warrior. Warrior allegedly jumped the gun during a meeting with McMahon. When questioned about illegal HGH shipments from a pharmacy in England, Warrior shifted the blame to Bulldog without hesitation. Warrior claimed Bulldog facilitated the transaction and provided contacts for obtaining the substances. Bulldog maintained he only provided a phone number as a favor to someone who asked. He wasn't involved in distribution. He wasn't making money from it. He wasn't organizing shipments. But the implication was enough in the midst of a federal investigation. He got fired just months after his historic SummerSlam victory at Wembley Stadium. The highest point of his career was followed immediately by termination based on accusations from someone he considered a colleague. The sense of betrayal was profound. Warrior had thrown him under the bus to protect himself. There was no loyalty, no consideration for Bulldog's career or family, just self-preservation at any cost. The second moment of betrayal happened 6 years later in 1998 at WCW's Fall Brawl pay-per-view. Warrior had returned to wrestling with his typical demands and ego. He insisted on elaborate production for his entrance. Everything had to serve his character presentation. Warrior insisted on a specialized trapdoor in the ring for his entrance. He wanted to appear from below the ring as part of his mystique. The production team installed the trapdoor according to his specifications. The problem was that other wrestlers weren't properly informed about its exact location or structural integrity. Bulldog was unaware of the trapdoor's location during his match. Wrestling requires constant awareness of ring positioning. Wrestlers need to know where they are at all times to execute moves safely. An unexpected structural weakness in the ring is a disaster waiting to happen. Bulldog landed awkwardly on the trapdoor during his match. The impact was wrong. The give in the ring was unexpected. He suffered a severe spinal injury immediately. The spinal injury led to a spinal infection that required aggressive medical treatment. The pain was constant and intense. Doctors prescribed painkillers to manage the suffering. Those painkillers led to addiction. Many close to Bulldog believe the trapdoor incident directly contributed to his early death at age 39. The spinal injury never fully healed. The infection weakened his system. The painkillers he became addicted to put additional strain on his heart. The chain of causation led directly back to Warrior's selfish demand for a specialized entrance. Bulldog harbored deep, lasting hatred for Warrior that never diminished. He viewed him as a selfish performer whose negligence effectively ended his career and ruined his health. Warrior never apologized, never took responsibility, never acknowledged the damage his ego had caused. To Bulldog, Warrior represented everything wrong with the wrestling business. Self-interest trumped safety. Image mattered more than the well-being of fellow performers. Short-term spectacle was valued over long-term health. Number 2, Shawn Michaels. The most frequently cited instance of Bulldog's legitimate professional hatred involves Shawn Michaels in the events of September 20th, 1997. This incident encapsulates the political manipulation and personal cruelty that defined wrestling's Attitude Era. In 1997, Bulldog was the inaugural European champion. The title was new, the prestige was being established. Bulldog was the perfect choice to represent European wrestling and give the championship credibility. He was from England. He was respected. He was over with fans across the continent. He was scheduled to defend the title at one-night-only pay-per-view in Birmingham, England. The location was deliberate. The WWF wanted to give British fans a major show. Bulldog defending his title in his home country made perfect sense. The match carried immense emotional weight far beyond the championship. Bulldog dedicated the performance to his sister Diana, who was suffering from terminal cancer. She had limited time left. This might be one of the last times she could see her brother perform. Diana sat in the front row. She could see everything. The crowd of 11,000 fans knew the story. story. The emotional stakes were understood by everyone in attendance. The original plan called for Bulldog to retain the title. It was meant to be a feel-good moment for the British fans. They would see their hero overcome the odds and keep his championship. Diana would see her brother succeed in what might be her final opportunity to watch him perform. Then Shawn Michaels, at the peak of his influence as a member of the clique, leveraged his relationship with Vince McMahon to change the finish. Michaels argued that a heel victory would generate more heat for a future rematch. He convinced McMahon that the business decision was more important than the emotional narrative. The finish changed hours before the event. Bulldog was informed of the change with barely enough time to process what it meant. There was no negotiation, no consideration for the circumstances. The decision had been made. Bulldog was forced to submit to a figure-4 leg lock while Triple H and Rick Rude interfered. The loss happened in front of Diana, in front of his family, in front of 11,000 British fans who had expected to see him win. The humiliation was complete. Bret Hart, who was there to support his brother-in-law and sister, later said he saw the light die in Davey's eyes that night. Something fundamental broke in Bulldog during that match. The betrayal was too profound. The cruelty was too casual. For Bulldog, this wasn't about the championship. Titles changed hands all the time. He had held championships before and lost them. That was part of the business. This was about callous disregard for the personal narrative surrounding his sister. Michaels knew about Diana's condition. Everyone knew. The decision to change the finish despite those circumstances revealed a level of selfishness and political manipulation that Bulldog couldn't forgive. The resentment solidified further when Michaels played a central role in the Montreal Screwjob just weeks later. The Screwjob betrayed Bret Hart, Bulldog's brother-in-law and closest ally in the company. Michaels' involvement in both incidents made him the embodiment of everything toxic about WWF's political culture. Bulldog followed Bret Hart out of the company in protest. The decision to leave WWF and join WCW was partially emotional. He was standing by family. He was making a statement about loyalty and principle. The move to WCW proved disastrous for his career. He was underutilized. He was kept in meaningless storylines. His momentum never recovered. His health deteriorated. The decision to leave WWF, influenced heavily by the betrayal at One Night Only, set him on a path toward career decline. Shawn Michaels represented everything Bulldog hated about the political side of wrestling. Personal stories were commodities to be exploited for heat rather than sacred elements of a performer's life. Loyalty meant nothing in the face of political influence. Power and leverage determined who won and who lost, not talent or circumstance. Bulldog never had that kind of power. He didn't have the relationship with McMahon that Michaels cultivated. He didn't have the clique protecting his interests. He was an exceptional performer, but exceptional performance wasn't enough when politics controlled everything. He paid the price for that lack of political power for the rest of his career. The image of his dying sister watching him lose in his home country haunted him. The knowledge that Michaels had manipulated the situation for his own benefit created a hatred that never diminished. Number 1, Dynamite Kid. The most profound and damaging relationship in Bulldog's entire life was with his cousin and longtime tag team partner, Thomas Billington, known professionally as the Dynamite Kid. Understanding this relationship is essential to understanding everything else that went wrong in Bulldog's career. They're often cited as one of the greatest tag teams in history. The British Bulldogs revolutionized tag team wrestling. Their matches against the Hart Foundation are considered classics. Their work in Japan influenced an entire generation of wrestlers, but their personal relationship was built on a volatile foundation of mentorship and psychological dominance that left permanent scars. Bulldog started his career at 15 years old. He was young, inexperienced, and eager to prove himself. Dynamite, older and more cynical, shaped his early worldview in the business. Every lesson Bulldog learned about wrestling came filtered through Dynamite's perspective. Dynamite was a notorious locker room bully. His ribbing frequently crossed from pranks into psychological warfare and physical cruelty. He seemed to enjoy inflicting discomfort and fear. The power he held over younger wrestlers fed something dark in his personality. Bulldog, the more affable of the two, was constantly drawn into Dynamite's conflicts by proxy. When Dynamite targeted someone, Bulldog was expected to participate or at minimum stay silent. When Dynamite's ribs went too far, Bulldog was implicated by association. The resentment grew slowly over years. At first, Bulldog idolized his cousin. Dynamite was the experienced wrestler showing him the ropes. But as Bulldog matured and developed his own judgment, management, he began to see the toxicity more clearly. Dynamite refused to adapt to the changing political climate in wrestling. The business was evolving. The old methods of intimidation and physical dominance were giving way to political savvy and relationship management. Dynamite either couldn't or wouldn't change with the times. By the late 1980s, Dynamite's refusal to compromise with WWF management over travel expenses and booking decisions created a crisis. Management wanted the Bulldogs to be more flexible. Dynamite dug in his heels. The conflict escalated until it became untenable. The result was that Dynamite's stubbornness forced Bulldog into a premature exit from the company in 1988. Bulldog wasn't ready to leave. He was still building his reputation. He was still establishing himself as a star, but he was tied to Dynamite through their team. And when Dynamite burned bridges, Bulldog's bridges burned too. When Bulldog returned to WWF as a solo act in 1990, retaining the British Bulldog name, it represented both freedom and betrayal. Bulldog was finally able to pursue his own path, but using the team name felt like claiming ownership of something Dynamite had helped build. Dynamite was physically deteriorating due to his reckless style and substance use. His body was breaking down from years of high-impact wrestling. His opportunities were diminishing. His relevance was fading. Seeing Bulldog succeed as a solo performer while using the Bulldog name felt like a personal insult. Dynamite viewed it as betrayal of their partnership. In his mind, Bulldog owed his success to the foundation Dynamite had provided. Using the name was theft. Bulldog harbored his own resentment toward Dynamite for entirely different reasons. He believed Dynamite's toxic influence had stunted his early growth as an independent character. All those years of being the silent partner, the follower, the enforcer who backed Dynamite's plays had left him with a reputation problem. Dynamite left him with a reputation as a follower rather than a leader. Even when Bulldog achieved success on his own, he couldn't fully escape the shadow of his partnership with Dynamite. Promoters and other wrestlers remembered him as Dynamite's sidekick first. The ribbing that defined Bulldog's early career under Dynamite's influence created long-term consequences that haunted him for years. His reputation as a bully's partner made him a natural target for retaliation from wrestlers who had been victimized by the Bulldogs. The sucker punch from Jacques Rougeau, the dog incident with Jake Roberts, the locker room politics that kept him from breaking through to the main event level, all of it traced back to the habits and reputation Dynamite had instilled in him. Bulldog adopted the toxic culture of ribbing and intimidation because that's what Dynamite taught him was normal. That's what the locker room operated on in the 1980s. But then he paid for it throughout his career as the culture shifted and retaliation came. The lifelong rift between Bulldog and Dynamite never healed. There was no reconciliation, no moment of understanding. They went their separate ways carrying mutual resentment that only grew with time. Dynamite publicly criticized Bulldog until the end. In interviews and conversations with other wrestlers, Dynamite would dismiss Bulldog's accomplishments or claim credit for everything the Bulldogs had achieved together. The bitterness never faded. For Bulldog, Dynamite represented the original sin of his career. The mentor who shaped him also limited him. The partnership that made him famous also trapped him. The cousin who should have been his greatest ally became his greatest burden. These 10 wrestlers represent more than personal grudges on a list. They reveal the system Bulldog lived in throughout his career. The wrestling business in the 1980s and 1990s operated on toxic principles that destroyed lives while creating entertainment. Ribbing culture created physical and psychological trauma that lasted decades. What started as pranks escalated into genuine cruelty. Animals were abused. People were humiliated. Trust was destroyed. The excuse was always, that's just how things are done, but the cost was measured in damaged relationships and lasting resentment. Political games destroyed momentum and crushed spirits. Wrestlers with creative control clauses protected their positions at the expense of everyone else's careers. Bookers made decisions based on backstage relationships rather than talent or fan response. The best performer didn't always win. The most politically connected performer won. Dangerous negligence left careers in ruins and bodies broken. Safety was secondary to spectacle. Trap doors were installed without proper communication. Wrestlers worked hurt because taking time off meant losing your spot. The long-term health consequences were ignored in favor of short-term profits. Bulldog played his part in the toxicity. He can't be absolved completely. He was complicit in the ribbing culture. He participated in the bullying. He struggled to navigate the politics. But he also tried to play the political game when it suited him. But he also suffered more than most. The trap door that injured his spine and started the chain of events leading to his death. The booking change that humiliated him in front of his dying sister and crushed something fundamental in his spirit. The mentor who shaped him into someone the locker room resented and then abandoned him to deal with the consequences alone. The wrestling industry during Bulldog's era treated performers as disposable assets. They were used up and discarded. Their Their health problems were their own responsibility. Their psychological damage was ignored. The money kept flowing as long as the shows kept happening, and individual wrestlers were replaceable. Bulldog's story serves as a warning about the human cost of that system. The animosities he carried weren't just locker room talk or worked angles for the fans. They were genuine scars from an industry that failed to protect its most valuable people. The 10 men on this list represent different aspects of that failure. Dynamite Kid represents toxic mentorship. Jacques Rougeau represents retaliation for bullying. Jake Roberts represents the cruelty of ribbing culture. The Islanders represent crossed boundaries. Bad News Brown represents cultural clashes. The Warlord represents dangerous incompetence. Bret Hart represents family betrayal through narrative control. Hulk Hogan represents political gatekeeping. Ultimate Warrior represents selfish negligence. Shawn Michaels represents the weaponization of personal tragedy for heat. Each man left their mark on Bulldog's life and career. Each represented a moment where the business failed him or he failed himself. The cumulative effect was a career defined as much by conflict as by achievement. Yet for all the pain and conflict that defined his journey, Davey Boy Smith remains an icon of British wrestling. That truth cannot be diminished by the struggles and animosities that came with it. Wembley Stadium, 1992. 80,355 fans filling every seat. The roar of the crowd shaking the foundations. The weight of a nation's expectations resting on his shoulders. That was the proudest moment in British wrestling history. That moment defined him in the hearts of fans who were there and fans who only heard the stories. The British Bulldog was a powerhouse who could match strength with anyone. A technical master who learned from the best trainers in the world. A national hero who represented his country with pride. His matches are still studied. His influence is still felt. His legacy endures. Even as we remember the price he paid to build that legacy. Even as we acknowledge the conflicts and betrayals and mistakes. Even as we understand the system that used him up and left him broken. The icon remains, the legacy endures. The British Bulldog will never be forgotten.